Hi, welcome back. Well, it's great to have James Standish here, our resident human rights lawyer and religious freedom guy. Now, James, they say if you want to know what's important to someone, or to a country, I guess, you follow the money. And this sort of relates to what's happening in the US right now.
Yeah, it is. The Bible puts it this way: the love of money is the root of all evil. It's the root of
all kinds of evil.
That's right. Well, all kinds.
Yeah.
You know, you have slavery. Was a trade that was done not because people loved slavery, but because they wanted money.
Slavery
well, it is. That's
bigger now than ever, sadly.
Very good point. I was thinking about the transatlantic slave trade, but you're right, that's still going on. In the U.S., just recently, the Senate passed a bill that tied trade with religious freedom. Okay. What the bill does essentially is say that as the U.S. Negotiates trade pacts, they have to consider the religious freedom record of the country that they're engaging in negotiations with.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is basically, it can be used as a bit of a carrot-stick approach.
Well, that's exactly right.
Listen, if your country X, if you don't sort out your religious freedom record, we're perhaps not going to participate in trade with you as maybe enthusiastically as we might otherwise.
That's right, and we may not reduce the tariffs and all the things that go on in these trade negotiations. Now, interestingly, the House hasn't passed this bill. There's a lot of questions of whether that's going to happen. In fact, there's probably a pretty high likelihood that they won't. But they might.
Who knows? I mean, the politics of the US aside, I mean, this is a larger issue, isn't it, really?
It is.
And I think the conversation seems to be going in the other way a lot of the time, that the conversation I hear between Australia and China, for example, when we're discussing China in this country. China has human rights issues, we know that. But the argument is, but if we continue to trade with them, we can build a positive relationship. And perhaps on that basis, they'll listen to us when we talk about human rights improvements.
Yeah. Well, I've got a problem with that argument generally. And that is, the problem is this. Countries' human rights records and the way they approach human rights has very little to do with engaging in trade. I'll give you a good example. We said, well, look, China's going to have to get on the internet, and so, of course, everything's going to change. No. In China, the internet is thoroughly censored. In fact, information technology has been used to repress people, and even U.S. firms have been coerced into participating with that, giving information about individuals, and those individuals subsequently being arrested and prosecuted. So it is not necessarily the case. And more importantly, when we build up an economy, we are giving that economy power, and trade is a way that we build up economies. If we think about the most problematic societies vis-a-vis human rights in history, it's not the countries that have dysfunctional economies like the Soviet Union did. In fact, communism was as bad of a system as that was. Because their economic system was so messed up, it limited their ability to actually execute fully their vision. The Nazis, on the other hand, used free trade capitalism. It was Mercedes, it was BMW. Hugo Boss, the designer, designed the SS uniforms. That's why they look so great. And that's why it's so dangerous to have free trade and then build up an economy with no consideration of what the human rights consequences are.
You've used a couple of very emotive examples there. I mean, I think you're probably missing the fact that Germany was pushed under by a very harsh reparations regime. And what about South Africa? Surely the economic sanctions there had something to do with shutting that regime down.
Absolutely did. And that's my point. In South Africa, we took obviously a relatively small country compared to China or one of these other large. But we said, okay, you've got a problem there. We won't trade with you. And guess what? Things changed.
It worked.
It worked. Now, it doesn't always work.
In Cuba, less so, you'd have to say.
But it did limit Cuba's ability to export the corrosive ideology that was running them. And so, yes, there's limits to what you can do with trade to negotiations. But human rights should always be on the table, because as soon as you take that off, guess what? You're empowering the oppression of other people.
And as some people seem to forget too easily these days, religious freedom is part of that human rights package.
Oh, you bet. It's our first human right, never forget it.
Well, hey, thanks for your time today, James.
It's a pleasure.
We'll take a break now, and I'll be back straight after that with Family in Focus.